A man inside a Rolls-Royce spat at Kit Harington and called him just a delivery boy. 5 minutes later, Kit Harington was sitting at the head of the conference room, firing that man in front of the entire company. But before we dive into that story, if you admire Kit Harington and his incredible displays of kindness, leave a yes in the comments so we know. The wind cut through the morning fog as a black Ducati roared up the ramp of the imposing Vidian Quantum headquarters. 47 stories of steel, ambition, and cold glass. The building gleamed like an arrogant technological fortress, casting long shadows over the streets of San Francisco's financial district. Kit Harington sat on the bike, calm and serene. His jacket, already worn, showed the leather creased at the elbows. It wasn't a pose for show, but the reflection of many miles traveled. No security, no bodyguards around, no valets or commotion, just him and the Ducati. He took off his helmet, revealing his naturally styled grey-brown hair and amber-brown eyes, which scanned the entrance, seeking the truth, not compliments. It wasn't the first time Kit Harington had quietly invested in something, but this company, Vidian Quantum, was personal. The mission promised the ethical development of artificial intelligence, transparency, and community-oriented applications. However, rumors began to reach him. Contracts were being transferred, secrets were growing like an infection under a bandage. So Kit Harington did what he always did. He showed up unannounced. He parked outside the valet area and got off his motorcycle. The soles of his boots hit the ground once, twice, until suddenly a Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up, oblivious and arrogant. The bumper almost collided with the Ducati, which swayed dangerously. Kit Harington gripped the handlebars tightly, stabilizing the bike, but not before the tip of the kickstand scraped the sidewalk. The Rolls stopped dramatically. A man wearing a tailored navy blue suit got out, with a gold brooch on his tie and an ego so big it spoke before him. He adjusted his glasses with 2 fingers and shot a look full of contempt. "For God's sake," he sneered, "you almost scratched my car, you lunatic." Kit Harington blinked. He didn't respond. He just took a deep, slow breath. The man approached, looking at him as if he were a stain that was difficult to remove. "You delivery guys have no limits, do you? Or did your GPS send you to a coffee shop?" Another man laughed nearby, a junior assistant with a briefcase. The security guard at the valet entrance smiled maliciously, clearly recognizing the man in the suit. Richard Cavill, Director of Operations. The man Kit Harington had been watching from afar. "Sorry," Kit Harington said quietly. "I thought this was a tech campus, not a racetrack." Richard laughed dismissively, glancing sideways at the motorcycle and then at Kit Harington's jacket. "I thought this place had rules. Get that old clunker out of here before someone thinks this is a parking lot in Oakland." The security guard laughed again. Richard leaned toward him. "A word of advice, buddy. When it's serious, help stays outside." Kit Harington smiled slightly. "Thanks for the advice," he said, stepping away from the motorcycle. "I'll remember that." He put on his helmet and climbed onto the Ducati. No one noticed the detail inside his jacket, a discreet embroidery with the letters KR Holdings. Neither the valet, nor Richard Cavell, nor the portfolio assistant knew that the man they had just insulted was not just passing through. He was the owner of the building, and he was about to turn their worlds upside down. The Ducati had barely disappeared when Richard Cavell crossed the polished marble hall of Vidian Quantum. The sound of his shoes echoed like gunshots. He didn't look back. Why? The man on the motorcycle, whoever he was, didn't matter. A receptionist wearing a light blue blazer greeted him nervously. Richard didn't respond. "I want an espresso in the meeting room. No sugar," he ordered, adjusting his shirt cuffs. "And tell Travis to bring me yesterday's latest figures on the Shanghai expansion." Behind him, the glass doors closed with a whisper. Kit Harington entered, calm and serene. No one noticed. He carried his helmet under his arm and his jacket was partially closed. He waved slightly to the security guard, who was confused for a moment, as if he recognized him, but soon gave up. Meanwhile, Richard entered the private elevator reserved for the executive floor. Two junior analysts were already there. They shifted uncomfortably, making room as if a lion had entered the cave. "How's it going, Richard?" one of them asked. Richard turned and pointed to the younger one. "How's the CRM migration report coming along?" "I wasn't assigned that task." Richard rolled his eyes. "That's why the stock has been falling all quarter. Do your job or find another company to destroy." The elevator beeped and the doors began to close. "Get out," he said dryly. They hadn't reached the floor yet, but the two obeyed. When the doors closed again, Richard looked at his reflection in the mirrored panel, adjusted his tie, and smiled smugly. He loved mornings like this. He loved the feeling of control, of status, of seeing everyone around him seem smaller when he walked by. But fate, as always, was smiling at him too, albeit sarcastically. On the 47th floor, the meeting room stretched out like a glass observatory over the city skyline. A long table, 12 chairs, 11 occupied, coffee cups, charts, laptops. The conversation was lively, everyone speculating about the mysterious new majority shareholder who had acquired 51% of Vidian Quantum through offshore holdings. "It's old money," someone whispered. "Maybe a Saudi prince. I heard it's a Singapore company." "Whoever it is, they're late," Richard said loudly, so everyone could hear entering the room. He dropped into the chair at the head of the table as if it were his, because until that morning, it was. No one dared challenge him. "Did you see that crazy guy on the motorcycle outside?" He laughed. "I thought he was a Postmates delivery guy." Some laughed. Others smiled awkwardly. No one liked Richard very much, but they loved his position. He leaned back in his chair and took a sip of his espresso as if it were a rare wine. "I hope security is on the lookout. We don't want anyone smelling like gasoline around our shareholders." The door opened. They heard footsteps. Richard didn't look up until he heard a low but firm voice say, "Sorry I'm late." He froze. He turned slowly. The coffee cup stopped in midair. There was the man in the leather jacket, helmet under his arm, calm as ever, walking straight to the head of the table. For a long moment, no one breathed. Kit Harington entered the meeting room as if he were on another film set, calm, controlled, like the tide rising, slow, steady, and impossible to stop. His helmet dangled slightly in his hand. With his other hand, he unzipped his jacket with quiet precision. All eyes followed him, but only Richard Cavill's face changed color. Pale, then red, then pale again. The cup trembled slightly as he placed it on the table. "Who?" Richard began to ask. Kit Harington made a polite gesture to the others present. "Kit Harington, KR Holdings. I acquired 51% of Vidian Quantum 3 weeks ago. My legal team sent the documents. I imagine you've all reviewed them." A wave of tension swept through the room. Heads shook hesitantly, whispers spread like wildfire. Some executives hurried to open their emails. One took his cell phone out from under the table, another closed her laptop with a serious expression. The chair at the head of the table was empty. Kit Harington pulled up the chair and sat down exactly where Richard had been moments before. Richard didn't move. He was paralyzed by something instinctive, disbelief, panic, and the crushing weight of realization. Kit Harington placed his helmet gently on the table and, as if remembering something trivial, turned to Richard. "Oh, we've met before, haven't we? Your words were, 'It smells like gasoline.'" Someone coughed. Another looked away. Richard tried to laugh, trying to recover. "Kit Harington, I didn't realize it was you." Kit Harington interrupted him with a firm voice. "You saw someone you didn't recognize, someone who didn't look like what you expected, and you made a judgment out loud and in public." "I didn't mean to offend, but I ended up doing so," said Kit Harington, still calm. "And worse, you made assumptions." The silence in the room cut like broken glass. Richard's smile hardened. "Look, it was a misunderstanding. I thought you were—" Kit Harington raised his hand, not aggressively but decisively. Richard fell silent. "I came here today to observe, not to talk," continued Kit Harington. He opened his briefcase, took out a thin laptop, and typed something. The TV screen on the wall lit up, showing spreadsheets, transaction records, large bank transfers. Kit Harington didn't raise his voice. It wasn't necessary. These are payments made to a shell company registered in BEAS, linked to one of our purchasing managers and approved by the Director of Operations. He looked at Richard with an unreadable expression. "This is you." Richard's chair creaked as he shifted in his seat. "This is ridiculous," he tried to protest. Kit Harington cut him off. "This is theft. This is a breach of trust, and it's over." He stood up. "Security will escort you out immediately." Two men appeared at the door, silent and professional. Richard stood there, panting, his face red and trembling. "You think you can just walk in here like that?" "I didn't come in," replied Kit Harington. "I own this door." And so Richard Cavell was expelled from the room he believed he ruled. The doors closed with a soft click behind Richard Cavell, but the sound echoed through the boardroom like a gunshot. The silence that followed was the kind that makes every breath seem loud, every movement of the eyes obvious. Kit Harington remained standing, not out of anger, but out of conviction. His gaze swept across the room, not hostile, but penetrating. Several board members lowered their eyes to their papers. One of them took off his glasses to clean them, although it wasn't necessary. Another fidgeted with his pen, like someone waiting to be judged. Finally, Kit Harington broke the silence. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," he began calmly. "However, I didn't come here to remain silent." He walked slowly to the head of the table and rested both hands on the smooth oak surface. This company should be creating technology with a purpose, with responsibility. When I invested, it wasn't just money. It was faith. I believed in what Vidian Quantum said it stood for. But faith isn't blind, and it doesn't survive corruption. Someone finally spoke. Angela Park, the CFO. "We didn't know Richard was embezzling funds, Kit Harington. None of us realized it." Kit Harington turned to her. "Maybe, but what did you see?" he asked softly. "Did you see how he treated the employees? How he mocked those without power? Did you say anything when you should have?" Angela swallowed hard. She didn't answer. Kit Harington touched the laptop and switched the screen to a simple slide. "Respect, transparency, impact, 3 words. Our mission isn't a slogan, it's a responsibility. If we can't treat the receptionist, the janitor, the intern, or yes, even the guy on the motorcycle with dignity, then everything we've built is rotten before the code is even compiled." A silent wave rippled through the room. Several heads nodded. Kit Harington's tone softened. "I didn't buy this company to micromanage. I'm not going to spend all day giving orders, but starting today, I'm setting the standard." He pointed to the screen. "These values are non-negotiable. If you can't lead with them, leave." Another silence, this time heavier. Then, slowly, the head of engineering raised her hand. "I'm with you," she said. "It's time this place developed a conscience." One by one, the others nodded. Kit Harington sat back down, his presence anchoring the room. "All right," he said quietly. "Now let's build something worth believing in." A tap on his cell phone announced a message from his assistant. The media had already learned of Richard's dismissal. CNBC wanted a statement. Kit Harington replied with 2 words. "Not yet." He looked at the team, now his team, a company reborn, a future rewritten. Outside, the sun broke through the San Francisco fog, casting a strong beam of light on the Ducati, still parked on the sidewalk. For the first time all morning, Kit Harington smiled. "Did you make it this far? Then maybe you're one of those people who doesn't judge a man by his clothes or his motorcycle. Right, still here, if you believe that actions speak louder than appearances." Before noon, the news broke. Vidian Quantum's chief operating officer had been ousted over a corruption scandal. Kit Harington revealed a surprise majority shareholder. Hollywood star or corporate vigilante? The headlines spread across financial feeds like wildfire. LinkedIn was flooded with speculation. On Twitter, the hashtag #JarsMotorcycle was trending. But none of those headlines told the real story. None showed what happened right after the meeting room doors closed. Inside, silence gave way to cautious murmurs, like survivors walking through a battlefield, still unsure if the shooting had stopped. Angela Park leaned toward Kit Harington, her voice low and cautious. "What's your next move?" Kit Harington, still sitting at the head of the table, his fingers resting lightly on the polished wood, replied, "That depends on yours." She blinked, surprised. "Mine?" "You knew something was wrong," he said gently. "Not the money trail, Richard was good at hiding that, but the culture, the harassment, the intimidation." Angela sighed, shame written all over her face. "I didn't know how to deal with it." Kit Harington didn't accuse her or judge her, he just nodded. "Then fight with me now." Across the table, Ravi Patel, head of engineering, stepped forward. "I've been trying for months to set up a hotline for reporting. Richard always buried the reports." "You'll have funding before the end of the day," Kit Harington said without hesitation. Ravi blinked, surprised. "Just like that?" Kit Harington smiled discreetly. "When you eliminate the rot, decisions become much easier." He stood up again and walked over to the window. From the 47th floor, the city stretched out endlessly in every direction. Taxis, people, horns, fog rolling over the bay like a low tide of time. But far below, on the sidewalk, his Ducati waited, quiet, unperturbed. "That guy this morning," someone finally spoke from behind him. "Richard, did you really think he was a food delivery guy?" Kit Harington didn't turn around. "That wasn't the problem." "What was the problem then?" His voice remained firm. "The problem was that he believed that inside this building, people could treat others like that no one would stop him, that power means impunity." There was a long pause. "Starting today," he continued, "we're rewriting that rule." He turned to them, without fanfare, without drama, just with clarity. "We're going to build a company that treats the doorman and the CEO with the same respect. A place where silence doesn't mean safety for those who make the most noise in the room." Kit Harington reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. The name Naomi was written at the top of the next page. Angela looked down. "Who is she?" "Someone I met on the bus 3 weeks ago. She's 15. She taught herself to code in Python on a used tablet. She wants to change the world. She starts on Monday. Full scholarship internship. Someone make sure she gets a laptop." Kit Harington closed his jacket. His time there that day was over. He looked around the room. "Let's make sure that when she arrives, we don't look anything like the company Richard built." And with that, he was gone. Richard Cavell was alone in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, parked in an underground parking lot 2 blocks from Vidian Quantum's headquarters. His tie was loose. His face still bore a slight red mark where the security guard had grabbed his arm, not violently but with a definitive and irreversible firmness. His cell phone vibrated with new emails every 30 seconds. Legal, human resources, public relations, 2 journalists. An anonymous message with just 2 words. "I told you so." He didn't open any of the emails. He just stared out the dark window, watching his own reflection. The man staring back at him was not the alpha predator he had been that morning. No, that man had been stripped layer by layer in front of the same people he humiliated for fun. He clenched his jaw. "He's just an actor," he muttered like a mantra. But he couldn't believe it anymore. Not now. Meanwhile, at Vidian Quantum, the consequences of Richard's fall echoed like distant thunder. Before noon, 3 anonymous emails arrived at Human Resources, each reporting cases of harassment or unethical pressure under his leadership. One was from a receptionist, another from a junior engineer, and the third from Hector, a janitor. Hector had almost quit 2 months earlier when Richard yelled at him in the lobby over a spilled coffee that wasn't even his. But that day, Hector showed up smiling. The building felt different. The air no longer weighed on people as it had before. Angela Park walked through the engineering floor for the first time in months, not just to check on progress, but to listen. She sat down next to a young developer who had just finished his night shift and shared a sandwich from the cafeteria. 2 days earlier, that would have been professional suicide. Now it felt like leadership. But not everything had disappeared with Richard. In a quiet server room on the 12th floor, Ravi Patel reviewed old access logs. The files Kit Harington had shown him were just the beginning. Someone else had approved the transfers to Beas, a ghost firm buried under layers of anonymity. Ravi frowned. Richard didn't do this alone, he muttered. In the nearby office, Kit Harington stood in front of a whiteboard, drawing silent arrows between coded names and offshore entities. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he held a black pen in his hand. At his side, Naomi, the 15-year-old intern he had mentioned, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Who was he paying?" she asked. Kit Harington pointed to a box marked Echo Vale Latitude. "We're about to find out," he said. "But one thing is certain," he capped the pen. Richard was just the beginning. Outside, somewhere in the city, Richard got out of his car, put on his sunglasses, and dialed a number. The voice on the other end answered without greeting him. "It's over," Richard said. There was a pause. The voice replied calmly, quietly, "No, it's not over." The elevator to basement B5 had no buttons. It only worked with a magnetic card, and only 3 people in the company had access to it. Kit Harington was alone in that steel box. The dull hum of the descent vibrated under his boots. In his hand, he held a thin, unmarked briefcase, heavy with the weight of its contents. On the cover was a note written by Ravi just 2 hours earlier. Echo Vale wasn't just a fictional company. It was a conduit. The elevator doors slid open. The room was dark, filled with servers and lit by a soft blue light. Naomi was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with 2 laptops and 3 cables connected to a set of routers she probably didn't know how to access. "I reviewed the financial records," she said without looking up. "Echo Vale isn't just linked to Richard." She pressed a key. The screen on the far wall lit up, several names, several countries, and at the top of the chain, a name that hadn't appeared yet. Thomas Verne, chairman of the board. Kit Harington's expression didn't change, but the atmosphere in the room did. Verne wasn't just a board member. He was the man who had welcomed Kit Harington to the company 6 months earlier. The same man who had talked about shared vision and protecting innovation. The man who had given Richard the green light. Now it all made sense. Richard was just the shield. Verne was the sword. Above, Angela stood before the assembled employees. She read a message that Kit Harington had sent minutes earlier. Clear, firm. Corruption isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a suit and calls itself strategy. But make no mistake, we will find it and we will eliminate it every time. The room applauded, not out of courtesy, but out of relief. Something real had begun. In the basement, Naomi raised her head. "What are you going to do?" Kit Harington tucked the briefcase under his arm, his eyes half closed. "I'm going to give him a chance to leave on his own." "What if he doesn't?" Kit Harington turned to her. "Then we remind him what he is." He paused near the elevator. "Power only works when people are afraid to speak up. It's easy to confuse positions with integrity, suits with leadership, kindness with principles. But true leaders show up in silence, when no one is looking, when the cameras are off, when the man on the motorcycle is ignored. There will always be people like Richard. But people like Kit Harington, they change the system, without shouting but showing up, listening, and not backing down when it matters. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance, background, or the way you dress? Tell us your story in the comments. Let's be the people who speak up, because silence is safe, until it's not. If this story moved you, be sure to share it with someone who needs to hear this message of courage and integrity. And of course, subscribe to the channel to receive more real stories that inspire and show the power of human determination. Want to continue being moved and learning? Then click on one of the videos that appear on the screen and immerse yourself in another story that will touch your heart. See you in the next video.